AITA for not giving my diploma to my brother after my parents freaked out at graduation? The moment the dean called my name to receive my diploma, my parents lost it. They stood up in the middle of the crowded auditorium, their faces red with anger, and started screaming at the top of their lungs. Their voices echoed over the applause, demanding I hand over my diploma to my brother right there on stage. People turned their heads, confused and whispering, while I stood frozen, clutching the leather folder. My brother just sat there, smirking, like he expected this. The dean paused, unsure what to do, as my parents kept yelling that my brother deserved it more because I'd wasted my chance. Security started moving toward them, and I could feel every eye in the room on me. This was supposed to be my day for years of late nights, exams, and stress, and they turned it into a circus. My hands shook, but I didn't move. I'd worked too hard for this. The screaming got louder, and the room felt like it was closing in. That's when I knew this wasn't just about the diploma, it was about control. They'd planned this, and I wasn't going to let it slide. Years of effort led to that moment on stage. High school ended with decent grades, but college was the real test. I picked a tough engineering program at a state university, knowing it would mean long hours and little sleep. My parents didn't care much about my choice. They barely asked about it. My brother, 2 years older, dropped out of community college after one semester. He spent his days gaming and working odd jobs, never sticking to anything. I paid for school with scholarships, part-time work, and loans. My parents didn't contribute a dime. They always said money was tight, but they bought my brother a new laptop and paid his rent when he moved out. I studied in the library until midnight most nights, surviving on cheap noodles and coffee. Weekends meant projects and group assignments, not parties. My brother mocked me, saying I was wasting my time, that degrees didn't matter. My parents nodded along, calling me stubborn for not listening to him. Graduation day crept closer, and I started feeling proud. I'd made it through on my own. Invitations went out to family, and my parents confirmed they'd come. They didn't mention any plans beyond showing up. I assumed they'd be happy to see me succeed. The ceremony was set for a Saturday afternoon in May, and I picked out a cap and gown. Everything felt normal until I got home the night before. That's when they dropped the first hint something was off, saying my brother had been talking about how unfair life was to him. I brushed it off, thinking it was just their usual whining. The real storm was waiting the night before graduation started quietly. I got home from a final rehearsal at the university around 7. My apartment was small, just a one-bedroom I shared with a roommate who'd already left for summer break. My parents called while I was heating up leftovers. Their voices sounded tense, not excited. They asked about the ceremony details, where to park, what time to arrive. Then the conversation shifted. My mom brought up my brother out of nowhere. She said he'd been feeling down lately, that he regretted dropping out. My dad jumped in, saying I'd done well but my brother deserved a break too. I didn't know what they meant, so I just listened. They kept talking about how hard his life had been, how he never got the chances I did. I reminded them I'd worked for every opportunity, no one handed me anything. They went quiet for a moment, then said they'd see me tomorrow. The call ended, and I sat there, confused. It didn't feel like a celebration was coming. I tried to shake it off and focus on ironing my gown. Sleep didn't come easy that night. My phone buzzed at midnight with a text from my brother. He wrote that he was proud of me but added a line about how he wished he'd finished school. It seemed off, like he was fishing for something. I didn't reply. By morning, my stomach churned with nerves, but I told myself it was just graduation jitters. I drove to the auditorium alone, parked, and joined the other grads backstage. My parents and brother arrived later. I saw them in the crowd as I peeked out. They looked normal, sitting together, waiting. Nothing hinted at what they'd pull. The ceremony began, names got called, and everything moved smoothly. Then it was my turn. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation as the ceremony started. Graduates in black gowns lined the seats, their families crowded into the bleachers, holding flowers and cameras. The air carried a mix of excitement and nerves. I sat midway back, skimming the program booklet, tracking the names until mine. My palms felt damp, but I was calm, ready. The dean took the podium, gave a brief talk about dedication and success, then began calling graduates. People crossed the stage, collected their diplomas, and shook his hand. Claps and cheers rang out, flashes popping from the audience. My row stood as our turn approached. I straightened my cap, keeping it in place. The line moved quickly, almost too fast. From my spot, I spotted my parents and brother, 10 rows up. My mom clutched her phone, likely filming. My dad sat forward, elbows on his knees, focused. My brother slouched beside them, arms crossed. They didn't acknowledge me when I looked, no wave, no nod. My parents always treated me like an afterthought. They praised my brother constantly, calling him smart despite his dropout, saying he just needed a break. Me, they ignored unless I messed up, then they'd lecture me about responsibility. They paid for his stuff, laptops, rent, while I scraped by on scholarships and jobs. They'd hint I was selfish for focusing on school, that I owed him something. The girl ahead of me got her diploma, and then the dean called my name. It boomed through the speakers, sharp and clear. I stepped onto the stage, steady, and approached the dean. He smiled, handed me the leather folder, and shook my hand. Applause started standard, scattered claps. Then my parents erupted. They shot up, faces flushed, screaming my name. Then my brothers. They demanded I give him the diploma, right there. My mom's voice cracked with fury, arms flailing. My dad jabbed a finger at me, then at my brother, yelling I didn't earn it. He did. They'd always favored him, excused his failures, blamed me for outshining him. The crowd reacted, gasps, whispers, phones out recording. Security shifted toward them. The dean hesitated, next folder in hand. My brother sat still, smirking, like he'd known this was coming. I held the diploma tight, heat flooding my face, and walked off stage. Their screams followed. Meth auditorium turned into a mess after I left the stage. My parents' screams didn't stop. They got louder, drawing every eye in the room. I stumbled back to my seat, diploma still in hand, my heart pounding. Security reached them, 2 guards in black uniforms grabbing their arms. My mom yanked free and threw her phone at the stage, missing the dean by inches. It smashed on the floor, pieces skittering across the wood. People around them stood up, some yelling back, others trying to move away. My dad shoved a guard, shouting that they'd sue the university for disrespecting their family. The dean called for calm over the mic, but no one listened. Then my brother stood up. He didn't just sit there smirking anymore. He charged down the aisle toward the stage. His face was twisted, like he'd snapped. He vaulted over a row of seats, knocking an old man's cane out of his hand, and made it to the front. He grabbed the mic stand from the dean, who backed off, stunned. My brother started ranting into it, voice blasting through the speakers, saying I'd stolen his future, that I'd cheated my way through school. Lies he'd never even tried. The crowd erupted, some booing, others shouting for him to get off. Then he pointed at me and said he'd hidden my acceptance letter years ago, thinking it'd stop me. That hit hard. I'd wondered why I'd had to reapply. Security tackled him mid-sentence, pinning him to the stage. My parents broke free again, rushing to help him, clawing at the guards. A woman next to me whispered she'd called the police. Sirens wailed outside within minutes. The ceremony halted, graduates sat frozen, families gawked. My phone buzzed with texts from classmates asking what was happening. I just stared ahead, numb, as cops stormed in, cuffing my parents and dragging my brother out. The diploma felt heavy now, like a target. The police dragged my parents and brother out of the auditorium, leaving the ceremony in chaos. The dean tried to continue, but most people left. I stayed in my seat, holding the diploma, still processing what happened. My phone buzzed with texts and calls. Classmates sent a video of the meltdown that was already going viral online. I turned it off. The auditorium emptied, and I walked to my car. Outside, cop cars filled the parking lot. My parents were in one, still yelling about me humiliating them. My brother, cuffed nearby, shouted about his stolen future. A cop approached me with a notepad, asking if I knew my parents had filed a report with the university earlier that week. They claimed I forged my grades to get my degree revoked before graduation. The school rejected it for no evidence, but they'd planned the public outburst anyway. I told the cop I had no idea. He wrote my statement, said they'd face charges for disorderly conduct and possibly assault for shoving a guard, then gave me a case number. I drove home, passing a news van arriving at the scene. The story was spreading fast. The drive home took 20 minutes, but it felt longer with my head spinning. I parked and went inside my apartment, locking the door behind me. The diploma sat on the kitchen table where I dropped it. My phone stayed off. I didn't want to see the messages or videos piling up. An hour later, a knock rattled the door. It was a detective, not the cop from earlier. He said my parents and brother were at the station, still ranting, and now claiming I'd stolen money from them to pay for school. They'd filed a theft report that morning, hours before the ceremony, accusing me of taking thousands from their savings. I told him it was nonsense. I'd funded everything with scholarships, loans, and jobs. He asked for bank statements to prove it, and I handed over what I had. He nodded, said it'd help, then dropped another bomb. My brother had confessed to trashing my old car 2 years ago, the one I'd saved up for, found scratched and dented one morning. He bragged about it to the cops, saying I deserved it for showing off with my grades. The detective said they'd add vandalism to his charges. Then my landlord called. Reporters had shown up outside, asking neighbors about me. The viral video had hit local news, and they wanted my side. I told the landlord to keep them out. He agreed, but warned me it'd get worse. By night, my email inbox had dozens of messages, classmates, strangers, even a professor asking if I was okay. One was from my cousin, saying my parents had called her from jail, begging her to convince me to drop the diploma and give it to my brother. She refused, but they wouldn't stop. The detective called again before I went to bed. He checked my records, my finances were clean, and the theft claim was falling apart. My parents' story didn't match their bank logs. He said they'd stay locked up until a hearing, and my brother might face extra time for the car. The news van stayed outside all night. The next morning started with my phone buzzing nonstop. I turned it back on to check the time. Texts from unknown numbers flooded in, some supportive, others calling me a jerk for ruining my family. The video of the graduation meltdown had hit over 1 million views overnight, and news outlets picked it up. I scrolled X and saw my name trending with clips of my parents screaming and my brother's mic rant. Reporters camped outside my apartment, their vans blocking the street. I peeked through the blinds and saw cameras aimed at my door. My landlord texted that he'd called the cops to clear them out, but they kept coming back. A local station aired an interview with my parents' neighbor, who claimed I'd always been trouble and that my brother was the real victim. Lies, he barely knew me. Then my email pinged with a message from the university. The dean wanted to meet, saying the incident had embarrassed the school and they were considering a statement. I replied I'd come in later. Mid-morning, my cousin called. She'd visited my parents in jail, and they doubled down, now saying I'd forged their signatures on my loan applications. She didn't buy it but warned me they were desperate. I dug through my files, found the loan docs, all legit, signed by me alone. The detective called next. He confirmed the theft accusation was fake. My parents' savings hadn't been touched in years. But my brother had escalated. He told the cops I'd threatened him with a knife last year, a total fabrication. The detective didn't believe it, said they'd check cameras from my building to disprove it. Then a lawyer I didn't know emailed, offering to represent me if I sued my family. I hadn't even thought that far. By afternoon, a coworker from my part-time job texted he'd been fired after defending me to a customer who recognized my name. The story was bleeding into everything. I drove to the university, dodging reporters, and met the dean. He asked me to sign off on a press release blaming my family, not the school. I agreed. It was true. Leaving, I saw a protest sign in the parking lot, Justice for the Brother. Someone had started a petition online to give him my diploma. It had hundreds of signatures already. The chaos didn't stop, but I had to move forward. The detective called 2 days after the university meeting with updates. My parents' theft claim collapsed, no evidence, just their word, and the judge tossed it at the hearing. They got 30 days for disorderly conduct and assaulting the guard, fined heavily. My brother's vandalism confession stuck, cameras from back then showed him keying my car. He faced 6 months, plus extra for lying about the knife threat. The cops found no proof, and my building's footage cleared me. I didn't visit them in jail, nothing left to say. The news cycle shifted after a week, but the online mess lingered. The petition for my brother hit 1,000 signatures before fading. I blocked the harassment on X and locked my accounts. The university released their statement, pinning it all on my family, and the dean offered me a quiet diploma reissue, no ceremony, just the degree. I took it. My cousin cut ties with my parents after they kept blaming me from behind bars. She mailed me a box of my old stuff they'd stored, photos, school awards, things they'd never cared about. I landed a job offer from an engineering firm I'd interned with. They'd seen the story but focused on my grades, not the drama. Reporters quit showing up, and my landlord got the vans towed. Life settled, but the rift was permanent. My family stayed obsessed with my brother's deserved success, even locked up. I kept the diploma on my desk, a reminder I'd earned it despite them. No apologies came, and I didn't expect any. The screaming from that day echoed in my head sometimes, but I'd built my own path. They couldn't take that.